I understand your anger at those who haven't gotten vaccinated. That 25% can cause a lot of damage, and they are.
To whom? To the 25%. It is not about actually achieving more vaccines. It's about shifting blame away from Joe Biden being a failure of a president. Let's be real about this. Joe Biden is a failed president. He's a failed president. He failed in Afghanistan, and he blames everybody else. He has failed on the economy, and he blames everybody else. And he has failed on COVID, and so he blames everybody else. And what this necessitates is Joe Biden making policy moves that are unlikely to result in any sort of serious improvement for the American people, but are simply designed to shift blame away from himself. So just like the Americans stuck in Afghanistan eventually, said the administration, are there because they want to be there, right? It's their fault that they are stuck there, not our fault for running the worst designed surrender in modern American history. Nope, it's really not about that. It's about the Americans stuck there. It's their fault. In the same way, Joe Biden's failure to prevent the vaccine mandates and the mask mandates from being promulgated in blue areas and therefore shutting down the economy, his unwillingness to recognize when we have reached the end of a pandemic and it has now just become endemic, his failures there have now necessitated that he take this extremely harsh action that is unlikely to ever be implemented because, frankly, no one is going to comply. So we'll get into the policy of this in just 1 second and why I say that this thing is never going to be implemented on a wide scale, why it is likely to be struck down, why it's almost unenforceable, even were it not to be struck down. But last night, Joe Biden made the most authoritarian move that I have seen in the last 10, 15, 20 years of American politics. I'm having a hard time pegging it exactly because we've seen authoritarian moves before. Very often, it turns out, Democratic presidents have a bad habit of saying, I don't have the power to do X, and then 5 seconds later, they just do it. So you remember Barack Obama said over and over and over, I don't have the power to simply stop enforcing immigration law, and then he just did it. And you'll remember that Joe Biden said, I don't have the power to issue an eviction moratorium via the Centers for Disease Control, and then he just did it. Well, you'll recall that this administration has over and over and over said they do not have the power to issue any sort of vaccine mandate. Here is Joe Biden back in December of last year saying he didn't agree with the idea of a federal vaccine mandate. This was after the election.
No, I don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand to be mandatory, but I would do everything in my power. Just like I don't think masks have to be made mandatory nationwide. I'll do everything in my power as the President of the United States to encourage people to do the right thing, and when they do it, demonstrate that it matters.
Okay, so that was back in December. And then in July, his own press secretary, Jen Psaki, said, don't worry, there's not going to be a federal vaccine mandate. We're not even thinking about that. Liars, liars, liars. Because again, as soon as things got bad, it was time for Joe Biden to shift blame. And again, that's what this policy is really about. His entire policy here is about shifting blame from himself and his failures of policy to the unvaccinated. So here is Jen Psaki back in July saying no vaccine mandate.
Perhaps the federal government should step in and issue mandates? And if not, are you putting the needs of unvaccinated people ahead of the needs of vaccinated people?
Well, I think the question here, one, that's not the role of the federal government. That is the role that institutions, private sector entities, and others may take. That certainly is appropriate.
That literally is not the role of the federal government, says Jen Psaki. Well, until yesterday, at which point the Biden administration, seeking to shift blame away from Afghanistan and focus away from Afghanistan, and seeking to shift blame away from the economic stagnation, shifted away from the administration, decided the people you really should hate are your fellow Americans. Those are the people you should hate. The unvaccinated who live next door to you. Those are the people you should hate. Okay, this brings me back to a point that I've made 1 million times at this point. The worried in America, the people who are deeply worried about COVID at this point, are almost entirely the vaccinated, which is insane. Once you're vaccinated, you should not be worried about whether your neighbor is unvaccinated. It makes no difference to you. This notion that you should be walking around in abject fear because your neighbor is unvaccinated is totally crazy. It is unmoored from scientific reality. First of all, the vaccinated are capable of infecting other people. Second of all, once you're vaccinated, your chances of hospitalization or death are extraordinarily low because, again, the vaccines are incredibly effective. You want to make people hesitant about the vaccine? Keep telling them that even after you're vaccinated, the unvaccinated might infect you and you might die. It's a completely mixed, confused message. But again, it is not about consistency. It is not about efficacy. It is not about actually achieving more vaccines, right? All this is about shifting blame away from Joe Biden being a failure of a president. The economic stagnation that we are seeing is not, in fact, the result of the Delta variant. The economic stagnation that we are seeing is a pure result of bad policy being made in blue states and by the federal government. It's about the media scaring the living hell out of people so they don't want to go to stores. It's about people in blue states saying you can't go back to work because even if you're vaccinated, you might get sick again. There is a reason, I keep repeating this because it's true, there is a reason that all of the best states in America in terms of unemployment rate are red, and all of the worst states in America in terms of unemployment rate are blue. There is a reason for that. It is because a huge swath of this country has been completely disconnected from the reality of the science, disconnected from the reality of the statistics. And so Joe Biden is now saying, you need to blame your neighbor. Don't blame me for the lockdowns. Don't blame me for the mandates. Blame your neighbor. It's their fault that I'm doing this. Or maybe it's your fault for doing it. Maybe it's your fault for doing it. You can see the blame shifting in real time. It's ugly and it is un-American. It's un-American to say, I have to take this policy against you because your fellow Americans are doing something bad. So now I'm taking this policy and I'm doing it against all of you. And you should hate your neighbor, right? It's the Full Metal Jacket style governance, right? Somebody in your barracks didn't do the proper thing. So now all of you have to do push-ups. And later you can go over to that guy, you can put some soap in a bed sheet and you can beat the living hell out of him. That is Joe Biden's style of governance. It is, in fact, un-American. And it's evidence that he is a failure as both a president and as a decent human being with the kind of power that he's attempting to wield. In 1 second, we'll get to Joe Biden's ridiculous and horrifying speech. Frankly, the stuff that he was saying yesterday, is there a low for Biden? There is no floor. There really is not. I thought that the worst speech that I'd heard was the speech that he gave like last week upon the withdrawal from Afghanistan, where he championed himself and patted himself on the back while hundreds of Americans were still stuck behind enemy lines. Fast forward 1 week, and now he's calling his fellow Americans, treating them as his subjects. They're not citizens anymore. They are just the people that he gets to order around. And if they don't do what he says, he will force them to do what he says. And it is dictatorial, authoritarian stuff. It really is amazing. Last night, Joe Biden wanders out to the microphone about 5 o'clock in the afternoon because, again, he has to make that early bird special over at Denny's. And he proceeds to yell at you. He's Grandpa Simpson yelling at the clouds. He's going to yell at you if you're unvaccinated. And you know what? He's going to yell at you if you're vaccinated too, because the fact is, if you were just madder at your neighbor, if you were more angry at the person who lives next door to you, then that would fix the country. So he starts off by talking about how frustrated he is with the people who are still not vaccinated. Right? Again, this is a free country, or it used to be. And I'm not angry at the people who aren't vaccinated. I'm not. Again, I am very pro-vaccine. I've told everybody in my office I think they ought to get the vaccine. Many of them didn't listen. That is their business. That doesn't make me angry because I'm not a tyrant. Joe Biden is a tyrant. So it makes him super angry when people don't listen to him, and the people that it impacts are the people who didn't listen to him. Now, again, this would be one thing if the unvaccinated were actually posing a danger to the people who are vaccinated. They are not. But that mixed message was completely elided here because, again, this is not about anything other than Joe Biden is a damned coward who wants to shift the blame for his own failures onto the backs of other Americans. So here he is.
Many of us are frustrated with the nearly 80 million Americans who are still not vaccinated, even though the vaccine is safe, effective, and free.
Okay, how about the Americans who have natural immunity? There's studies after studies showing that natural immunity is more durable than vaccine immunity. And yet there are no provisions in Joe Biden's proposed rule for people who have antibodies, for people who already have natural immunity. None, because this isn't about the science. It's about yelling at people. He continues along these lines. He just kept hammering this over and over. If you're unvaccinated, it's your fault I'm doing this. It's your fault that I'm hurting everybody. Right? It's not my fault I'm hurting you. It's your fault that I'm hurting you. Here's Joe Biden.
The vast majority of Americans are doing the right thing. Nearly 3/4 of the eligible have gotten at least one shot, but 1/4 has not gotten any. That's nearly 80 million Americans not vaccinated. And a country as large as ours, that's 25% minority. That 25% can cause a lot of damage, and they are.
To whom? To whom? To the 25%, right? Which Joe Biden freely admits. This is how you know that he's a dishonest, lying sack of... This is how you know it, right? Because when he says that they're causing a lot of damage, again, the rule of externalities, right, which is where government very often comes into play, is I can wave my fist around until it hits you in the face. And that is the general rule of externalities. But what Joe Biden is now saying is that he gets to intervene if I wave my fist around and it hits me in the face. If you're unvaccinated, you are not a danger to the vaccinated. You know who knows this? Joe Biden, who said it last night.
I want to emphasize that the vaccines provide very strong protection from severe illness from COVID-19. I know there's a lot of confusion and misinformation, but the world's leading scientists confirm that if you are fully vaccinated, your risk of severe illness from COVID-19 is very low. In fact, based on available data from the summer, only 1 out of every 160,000 fully vaccinated Americans was hospitalized for COVID per day.
So what the hell are you trying to yell at people for? I don't understand. I'm vaccinated. Again, I do not give... You can ask the people in my office. As soon as I was 2 weeks out from my final vaccination, I came into the office and people had been masking up, right? Many of the people in the office had been masking because I was concerned about me getting it and transmitting to my parents who are 65. Wasn't particularly worried about me getting sick, but I was worried about transmitting to my parents. And then I came in and people said, do you want us to wear the mask? I said, first of all, I never told you had to wear the mask, but if you want to take it off, I really don't care now. I really don't care because it doesn't matter to me. Joe Biden is saying it shouldn't matter to you. Once you are vaccinated, you are safe. But you should still be angry at the unvaccinated. Right? And he just continues along these lines. It makes no sense. Here he is saying another incoherent, nonsensical thing.
For the vast majority of you who have gotten vaccinated, I understand your anger at those who haven't gotten vaccinated. I understand the anxiety about getting a breakthrough case. But as the science makes clear, if you're fully vaccinated, you're highly protected from severe illness, even if you get COVID-19. In fact, recent data indicates there is only 1 confirmed positive case per 5,000 fully vaccinated Americans per day. You're as safe as possible, and we're doing everything we can to keep it that way. Keep it that way. Keep you safe.
Okay, so this old man is telling you that you're safe once you're vaccinated. But then he says this. He says, now you're not safe. So on the one hand, you're safe because you got vaccinated. On the other hand, you're unsafe. Now, let me ask, why is he saying you're unsafe? The reason he's saying you're unsafe is because he wants the lockdowns. He wants the mandates. He wants those things so he can justify his failed economic policies, so he can justify a turn away from your focus on Afghanistan, and so that he can justify you being angry, not at him, but at somebody else. Be mad at anybody, just not Joe Biden. This is the Biden doctrine in a nutshell. Be angry at everybody except for Joe Biden. How's this for a title? Ben Shapiro Show subscriber destroys like button with clicks and logic. I'd watch that. Make it happen, gang.